Few topics evoke as strong feelings amongst parents as the quality of their children's education, and polling data, as well as test scores here in the Maritimes, indicate pretty clearly that there is a lot of discontent out there about how the schools are handling that job of educating our young people, as well as there being a lot of objective data showing that performance stacks up relatively poorly compared to other places in Canada and internationally. My institute, and unusually this evening we're actually going to talk about something my institute has done. My institute, which is a public policy think tank, has taken this concern about the quality of our education to heart, and we now prepare an annual report card on the performance of every high school in Atlantic Canada. And that third annual report card is being released this week, published in collaboration with Progress Magazine, where it is again the cover story in this month's magazine. And joining us to help us understand what the report card says and what it means for our schools, for our students, for our families, I'm joined by two guests. Charles Cirtwill, who is the Vice President at the Atlantic Institute for Market Studies, is here with us. Charles, who is the head of the School Performance and Accountability Project at the Institute, has degrees in law and public administration from Dalhousie University, and before joining AIMS, he was with the Greater Halifax Chamber of Commerce. Welcome, Charles. Our other guest is Alan Parry. Alan is a transplanted Maritimer, if I can put it that way. He's a management consultant, and he's a former senior official with the Edmonton Public Schools, recently rated one of the top school districts in North America. And over the course of the show, we're going to get Alan's take on how school performance measurement has been a key part in making Edmonton's public schools some of the best around. Alan, welcome.
Thank you.
Charles, let's start with you. Before I get you to walk us through a sample of the school report card so people can get a sense of what it actually tells them about a particular school, let's start with a bit of history about the AIMS school report card. What made you and all the rest of us at AIMS be so crazy as to want to take on this idea of reporting on the performance of the public schools, the high schools in this case, in Atlantic Canada? And what did you find when you tried to put together the first report card?
Well, those are two very in-depth questions, so I'll try and cover them without going too far back in history. But basically, a lot of the work we did in the initial stages of the report card come out of the national and international student assessments that are readily available and reported on. Basically every 2 years you get another round of these. And of course what happens is invariably the Maritimes and Atlantic Canada as a whole tends to be at the bottom when you look at the comparisons nationwide. Well, you look at the 2001 Program International Student Assessments, for example, and we were 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th. And of course, the results come out, there's some hand-wringing, oh, we need to fix this, what should we be doing, maybe we need to spend more money, and then 2 more years pass, another set of test results come out, and invariably we're 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th again. So the group of us at the Institute reacted to this in a very strategic way. We said, look, there has to be something else we can do, something different. And the basic conception here is that education happens in schools. It doesn't happen in a system. It doesn't happen in a province-wide kind of way. It happens in individual schools. So we said, well, what do we know about the individual schools in the system? Are they working? Are they not working? Where do they need help? Surely there must be schools that are working very well. And if they are, we need to be trumpeting that fact and encouraging others to copy them. Regrettably, to get to your second question, when we went out there and started asking the question, what do we know about our schools? What's available? The answer, particularly in the Maritimes, is not much, or was not much. We have had an amazing impact, from my perspective, in the 3 years that the report card has been in the field, in terms of the number and amount of information that's out there about individual schools. Every one of the provinces, in response to our first report card, announced new measures that they were going to implement for their schools, new ways of getting the information in the hands of the people who need it, the parents, the students, the teachers, the school administrators, but even the broader community. And so what we found is that, particularly in Nova Scotia and Prince Edward Island, when there was a starting base, there was no foundation to build on. There was no information readily available. In Prince Edward Island, you had the annual reports to the school boards, which talks to you about the number of kids that are in individual grade levels. And that was really about it at that point. They had started to do a graduate survey, and the first set of that data was available, but There was really no global awareness that that study had even been done, and they were tinkering around with how to report it, and in fact they're still tinkering around with how to report it. But they had no system of standardized testing, no reporting of even the teacher-assigned grades in the high schools in Prince Edward Island, no assessment of how successful those kids are after they graduate. And that case is much the same in Nova Scotia. There's a limited standardized testing regime. There's no reporting of teacher-assigned grades. There's no reporting of performance at the middle school, so you don't have a feel for how well kids are doing coming out of the middle schools, whether the good students coming out of middle school actually succeed in high school, and whether the good students coming out of high school achieve after high school.
And in fact, it seems to me that one of the reactions we got from a lot of parents when the first report card came out was, thank God, I've been trying to find out what's going on in my kid's school for years, and nobody would tell me anything.
Well, it's even scarier than that, because the very first phone call I received the day we released our first report card was from a gentleman at I think it was Cole Harbour High. He's on the parent advisory committee at that school, so he's a volunteer in a position of authority, responsibility over the school. You would assume, as I did when I was a parent, you would assume that if anybody's going to have information about the school, it would be this gentleman. And he called me and he said that he spent 4 years trying to get this basic information and had never succeeded. So it was a revelation to me that this was the first phone call I got in response to the report card. And basically he was saying, I've been trying to help this school, trying to get information to tell me where to help, and I was never able to get it until now. That's a scary thing.
Now, New Brunswick has a lot more information than either Prince Edward Island and Nova Scotia.
Well, you notice I started with the roughest cases first, the PEI in Nova Scotia. In New Brunswick, what you have is a totally different mindset, and it's, as I characterize it when I'm talking to people in New Brunswick, it's a wonderful environment in which to work if what you want is an atmosphere where they understand their obligations to the students and are comfortable with the idea that they need to measure how well they're doing in meeting those obligations and report that information publicly. So, for example, New Brunswick has a history of extensive standardized testing across a wide variety of subject matter. Of course, the Francophone system is a little bit broader than the Anglophone system. They have tests in basically 4 kind of areas, math, language arts, humanities, and sciences, whereas the Anglophone is a little bit more limited. But they also have regular reports on enrollment figures, retention figures, the level in which the schools are actually servicing the community environment. That information is readily available to the public. Well, perhaps readily is too generous a term, but the information is publicly available in documents that researchers like myself are comfortable reading. Some parents are comfortable reading, but for others it's probably a little bit of a slog to get to the heart of the matter. But in addition to that, New Brunswick makes that information available to administrators and to the school community so that they have some concrete data on which to base their decisions and their allocations of resources in the coming years, and to look and address it at those kind of things. So there's no question that New Brunswick was ahead of the game when you started the process. Regrettably, the government has just announced about 6 months ago a review of the testing regime. And one of the things they're suggesting is actually eliminating some of these exams. So rather than being a leader and expanding on their leadership position, they're retrenching a little bit. And that's a little bit of a concern.
So we'll come back to this question of testing and whether testing is a good idea and who's doing good testing and not. But I want to make sure that we give people a sense of what's actually in the report card. Accepting that it's been a long, hard slog to get the information that we have. We've got about 5 minutes, so just walk us through what it is that the report card does and what the average parent could learn from it by looking at their school's assessment.
Sure. Well, we've been talking about New Brunswick, so let's just stay in that topic for a minute. We'll look at the first place school in this year's report card, and actually last year's report card, Sir James Dunn in St. Andrews. And what you find in our report card is you find a set of input measures. So it tells you the size of the school, the pupil-teacher ratio at the school, the relative affluence of the community. So it's a socioeconomic status indicator of the community that the school
serves. The research says that more middle-class communities their kids do better in school, and communities with more economic challenges and higher levels of unemployment, things like that.
You're absolutely right. The research says that the number one indicator of academic achievement is the socioeconomic status of the children. So you need to be able to control for that, because of course schools don't impact what the SES of the students they have to deal with. It's an outside factor. And the issue for the school is how well they respond to that challenge. Mm-hmm. So we make that information available and it's successful there. On the performance side, what we then get into is the level of post-secondary achievement, how the kids do in their first year of university or community college after graduation. We look at their performance in Anglophone New Brunswick. We look at their performance in math and science areas. So that again is
there are tests.
There are tests,
province-wide
tests in that area. One of the things we're looking at adding next year, of course, is the teacher-assigned grades, but that's a separate issue. The other subsetting we get into is language, arts, humanities. Unfortunately, in Anglophone New Brunswick, we've only got the language arts, as opposed to in Francophone New Brunswick, where we've got all four. So a parent going through Francophone would be able to look at all four of those fields. We also look at engagement measures. We look at the retention in all four grade levels, so grade 9s into 10, 10 into 11, 11 into 12, so you can get a sense how the school's doing, moving kids along, keeping them in school. We also look at the level of enrollment or the preparation for enrollment in post-secondary studies, so how well or how high a percentage of their students they're preparing for future studies, whether they've engaged them enough in the education endeavor that they feel comfortable moving forward. So that's the core set of measures. There's a little bit of a nuance this year in that we supply both contextual results on those 7 indicators and absolute results in those 7 indicators. Basically, what absolute means is we take your 3-year average, we rank you. Here's where you fit compared to everybody else. On the contextual side, we say we're going to control for all those things that you can't control for, the nature of your community, the size of your school, and we're going to say a school of this type in this type of community should be able to achieve at this level. If you achieve below that level, you get a bad grade. If you achieve above that level, you get a good grade.
Okay. Now, you've told us a little bit about what we've got for the average New Brunswick school. What about Nova Scotia? I mean, we're not able actually to compare schools from one province to another because we don't have the same information.
No, the measures for the various provinces are extremely different. However, in Nova Scotia, we have essentially all those measures that we had for New Brunswick. We didn't have that last year. And the reason we didn't have it last year is because the only thing we can get in Nova Scotia, school by school on the exams, is a centrally marked sample. We have requested the results for all the exams written at school by school, but so far the province and the boards have not supplied that. We are confident, or we're working again to get them this year, because we feel it's important to have a full, rather than a sample, the full size of everybody who's written.
Okay, now we've just got 1 minute before the break, so I'm sure that one thing that everybody's interested in is, what kind of school does well and what kind of school doesn't. A lot of people are worried that, for instance, rich city schools are going to do better than rural schools that might have a more, dispersed population. How does this come out?
Well, actually, that's one of the, again, as a researcher, it's a wonderful result for me that there is no predictive model. We had a rural school #1 last year, a rural school #1 this year, an urban school #1 the year before that in Nova Scotia. It's small schools, big schools, rural schools, urban schools, schools in downtown core, schools in suburban. So really, it's about what's going on in the school and not the characteristics of the school that dictate where these schools end up on the overall results. So success is possible no matter where you are. So there's no excuse.
So the top school in Nova Scotia is a rural school?
Yes.
And where is that?
It's the Islands Consolidated School.
And they were #1 last year?
They were #1 last year as well. They're a small rural school, relatively new.
And what about in PEI?
Prince Edward Island is Kincora Regional High.
Okay. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to come back and talk more with Alan Parry and Charles Cirtwill about the AIM 3rd Annual School Report Card right after this break. See you then.